Greetings everyone, Slizzle466 and EK from Team One Trick here. How are you doing, EK?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm ready to talk about some Reno decks.
Yeah, so this is a
My
bit of
favorite thing.
this is a bit of a different video. We're just going to be talking today. There's not going to be any gameplay, but there's a question that we've been getting over and over again since the Rise of Shadows expansion has dropped, and that question is, do you have a cool Reno Priest deck? Do you have a cool Reno Mage deck for us to try out? And so we want to address why, in the current state of the meta and where we are in the expansion, how Reno decks are really struggling to perform properly at the moment.
And it's not they're not performing for the reasons that you might be led on to believe either. It's not that they're bad decks.
No,
They're
not at all.
actually quite good in the right hands. It's
Yeah.
just everything's so unstable and everything is so new that it's just kind of hard to build the deck.
Yeah, and
It's gonna happen.
one of the first issues we want to touch on is that the meta is really diverse right now. Although we might have a few really powerful decks, there are a lot of different decks that you can currently play. You can see right now in my collection manager, I've got 16 decks built, and I play all of these decks. And so that makes it very difficult for a Reno deck, because typically when you build Reno decks, they're teched for the meta. How do you tech against so many decks? It's not possible. You've only got 30 card slots.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, not only are those 16 decks 16 different decks, they're doing completely different things that require for the most part completely different answers as well.
Yeah, like they,
You need a variety of different cards.
yeah, like there are Kingsbane rogues, there are Jade Druids, there's Big Priest, there's Odd Paladin. And they all have different game plans.
Exactly.
But interestingly, there has been a little bit of success with Reno Lock as of late. And one of the reasons that we think that Reno Lock is the better of the three popular classes is you've got Life Tap. And what's that lovely card that costs 4 mana?
Void Caller.
That's the one. Yeah. One thing we find is Reno decks Reno Lock can do unfair things, mainly because of Void Caller, just like cheating out a Mal'Ganis or cheating out a Void Lord. It's much more difficult for a Reno Mage and a Reno Priest to do that.
Reno Mage and Reno Priest do technically have mana cheat. They're just nowhere near as good whatsoever. Because if we're talking mana cheat for those classes, we're talking like Inkmaster Solia and Coffin Crasher. And Coffin Crasher is kind of a yikes because it's a fair Void Lord.
Yeah.
6 mana, 6/5, and Priest has no easy way to kill it. So you're really not going to be wanting to include a card like that. And, there's a big difference between a 9-drop coming down on turn 3 or turn 4 than, an 8 or a 9-drop coming down on turn 6 or turn 7. There's a huge difference, especially, given the nature of some of those cards, like Mal'Ganis and Void Lord against aggro and, that kind of thing.
For sure. And also keep in mind, it's only the 3rd week of the expansion now.
Yeah.
So the Rise of Shadows meta, it's still very young. We've seen two new decks pop up. We've seen the Darkest Hour Lock and we've seen Murloc Shaman.
Yeah.
There have been some
There's a couple new decks kind of on the fringe, kind of brewing, but we have to see if those are kind of just one-off successes or if they're the real deal.
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting things with Wild, because we saw last expansion in Rastakhan's Rumble, just out of nowhere, Mind Blast Priest got insanely popular.
And it was the last month of the expansion cycle too.
Yeah, so Wild's a little slower to get things going.
Right.
And because of that, that's why, Reno decks are very reactive. They react to the meta. And if your meta's young, it's unstable, it's going to be difficult to construct a Reno deck to actually win.
Yeah, if you're building to be reactive and you don't know what you're reacting to, you're flying blind, and chances are, given the delicate nature of the deck, you're just going to be dudding most of the time because your cards just aren't going to hit.
And I like how you use the term delicate there, because one of the big issues with Reno decks is because you're only running singletons, it's really inconsistent when it comes to drawing what you need. Sure, Reno Lock has Life Tap, that makes life a little bit easier to get what you want. But with Reno Mage and Reno Priest, it's sometimes very draw dependent if you get the answers that you're looking for.
The best draw card outside of like, say outside of like neutrals, okay? Because neutral card draw is kind of the backbone of Reno Priest for the most part. If you're playing like the combo version, the extent of your card draw is going to be Power Word Shield. When Power Word Shield and like a Northshire Cleric kind of inconsistently are your two best card draw options, you don't have card draw.
And like there are some fancy things you can do, like Wild Pyro, Circular Healing, but it doesn't really fit the Reno Priest theme. And a lot of the time, it's not so much that you're trying to cycle through your deck. It's because a lot of the time you might draw all these cards, and then you're all clogged up, and you're stuck with all these cards. And you just start tempoing things out just to clear your hand. It gets really awkward.
Other cards.
Yeah, for sure.
And a lot of cards in Reno decks, especially like Reno Priest and Reno Mage in particular, they're cards I like to call unitaskers. So they're in there for like one thing. So like a Galactic Crawler is just in your deck to have a soft counter to pirates, or you have an Ooze to be a counter to weapons.
Or you might have a Skulking Geist if Jade Druids are causing you problems.
Exactly. So a lot of these cards are just going to kind of sit around waiting for their time to be good. So, you might just have to dump them, and you might not even get the value that you expected to get out of them,
Yeah. And one thing you'll notice, like if there are many different tier lists out there, and you look at some of the top decks, they're very proactive. They're just like, think decks like Odd Paladin, King's Bane, Big Priest. They just throw things on the board and make your opponents deal with it. And Reno decks don't function like that. They're designed to, react to the board, control the situation, and eventually just grind your opponent out until they can't do anything else.
Yeah, in the past there have been decks that kind of do that. Like you have a lot of these N'Zoth Reno builds that are more minion centric, but in a lot of cases, the curve is kind of wonky and inconsistent, and it's either I develop onto the board or I clear the board. Whereas, a lot of these other decks, like, take Odd Paladin, for example, they're just always going to be able to make minions. They're always going to have something to contest the board with. They have layers and layers and layers of threats, and they don't have to make decisions on whether or not to give up the board to trade away a minion or something like that, because they're just always going to have the option to do almost whatever they want at any point. Whereas there's more decisions and sacrifices to be made by playing a Reno deck.
For sure. And speaking of proactive decks, there's also one specific deck which causes Reno decks a lot of problems: Kingsbane Rogue.
Yeah.
Kingsbane Rogue is a Reno deck's nightmare. You can only run so much weapon tech in your deck.
You can also only get out of the gates so quickly against them too, because I don't know, I feel like every time I'm playing against a Kingsbane Rogue, by the time it's turn 6, turn 7, they already have a 10 attack weapon that they can go infinite with.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, I've seen some players, they're so irritated by the Kingsbane matchup that not only are they running Gluttonous Ooze, but they're also running Bran and Zola just to get more Gluttonous Oozes.
Yeah, Bran, Zola, Gluttonous Ooze,
Baleful Banker.
Mazel and I made a Reno Mage that played the 3-mana Ooze and the 2-mana Ooze and Glacial Shard because we wanted to have as much game against the Kingsbane as possible. And even then, it was still like inconsistent. You can run all the tech in the world, but sometimes it still just doesn't matter.
Yeah, and another deck that we should mention is our good friend Big Priest. Do you, not surprising to many people, Big Priest did get buffs this expansion. It got Katarina, it got Archmage Vargoth, and man, does it make it difficult to deal with the board from a Reno for a Reno deck. Like with the exception of like a mass polymorph off Kazakus, it's really hard to deal with some of those boards.
Yeah, well, the big thing, and this is something that I see everyone talk about everywhere, is we'll just dilute the res pool. We'll play Gravel Snout Knight and the task person
Marsh Drake.
Yeah, like when you're considering investing to have all of those kinds of cards make an impact, we're talking about having to run like 4, 5, 6 of those style of effects. And if I'm committing 20 to 30% of my deck just for those kinds of cards, we're gonna have to have a chat.
Yeah, because
something that we want to be. That's not something we want to be able to do, or want to have to do. We want to be able to hit multiple matchups with our cards to give us the highest amount of chance across the board. It's very unlikely that you're only ever going to play against one deck all day, every day.
Yeah, I mean, you can tech to pretty much always beat Big Priest, but you're gonna lose to everything else. Like aggro is just gonna eat you up for dinner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. However, you take a deck like Reno Mage. Reno Mage is able to run 5 polymorph effects. The real way to counter a Big Priest is to just exile those, pesky minions from their res pool entirely. Just make sure that they don't get there in the first place. That way, they never have a chance in hell to resurrect them altogether.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, Reno Mage is your best bet if Big Priest is making you pull your hair out. Assuming you have.
Reno Mage is built super narrowly, so you beat. Again, we go back to the point that we made previously. You beat Big Priest and like even Lock, because it's gonna hit that tech is gonna hit the same kind of stuff, but you're gonna fall flat against almost everything else.
Yeah. And speaking of Reno Mage has so much AoE removal. It's amazing how it's not good enough to deal with some of these boards.
Well, so here's the thing: you compare Reno Mage removal to let's say, actually just Reno Priest and Reno Lock removal. For 7 mana, I get a Flame Strike. I deal 4 damage to everything, or I get Lord Godfrey.
Yeah.
Or Psychic Scream. For 6 mana, I get a Blizzard. I deal 2 damage to everything and I freeze it.
Yes,
or I can get a Light Bomb.
Yeah.
Or a Dragonfire Potion.
Yeah. So.
Or I don't know. Just everything else that Reno Lock has, because Defile and Hellfire and all that kind of stuff is just so good. Reno Mage's removal has a hard cap on the damage, whereas Reno Lock and Reno Priest removal is a lot more flexible and it scales up.
Yeah.
Because a lot of their removal is based on the power of their board.
Yeah, so it's interesting how Reno Mage has the best tools to deal specifically with big minions through polymorph effects, but once those big minions get on the board, you're in trouble, especially when they start coming back over and over and over again.
Yeah, if you don't have the opportunity to get rid of them, if you don't have the opportunity to get out in front of them, I'll reword it that way. Get out in front of them and get rid of them entirely, so that you just never have to deal with them. You're gonna struggle.
Yeah,
you're not gonna be able to hit everything. And no one's ever going to be able to hit everything, but you have to be able to pick and choose which minions that you're going to be able to deal with.
Yeah. So, is all hope lost, EK?
It's not. And you kind of hinted at this earlier. In particular, you mentioned that Reno Lock is kind of starting to see some success, mostly because it's Warlock. And that's kind of to be expected. But a lot of times when Reno Lock kind of figures out what those extra tech cards it's going to be running outside of its 21 auto includes, those 9 extra flex cards kind of start taking shape in the other decks, and people kind of use that as a shell or a kind of a package to go along with their class cards as well.
Yeah, and I mean also the various meta snapshots and meta reports are starting to trickle out in for people to get decks from, and I wouldn't say they necessarily dictate the meta, but I personally think they do influence it a little bit. You know, if for example, Tempo Storm had Odd Paladin as the #1 deck in the meta. A lot of people just say, "Oh, I'm going to play the #1 deck in the meta," and all of a sudden, everyone's playing Odd Paladin. Well, once that situation happens, once everyone is playing the same deck or playing decks to beat specifically that deck, then you're in a good spot to start busting out the Reno decks.
Yes, because suddenly the decks that you're building to beat have narrowed, and you can kind of withhold some of the cards you otherwise would have played. Like if I'm playing against a ton of Odd Paladin and, you know, maybe a little bit of like Warlock or something like that, I'm not going to include cards like Entomb or, you know, a lot of these big, heavy cards. I'm gonna lean more towards my anti-aggro cards. Like I'm gonna be playing Wild Pyromancers. I'm gonna be playing, you know, my Spirit Lashes, my Shadow Word Horrors, or my Volcanic Potions, my Twilight Flame Callers. You know, things like that that I otherwise wouldn't play in, you know, say a taller meta with a lot of Even Shaman or Even Lock or Big Priest.
Yeah, and I mean, even now, like we're seeing I mean, I don't know what you're seeing, but I'm seeing quite a rise in Jade Druids on the ladder.
I am too.
Turns out Vargoth is a really good card.
Yeah.
And you know, how do you shut down a Jade Druid? Skulking Geist.
Skulking Geist, and or get out in front of them, play for tempo.
Yeah.
But Skulking Geist. Skulking Geist is the easy way out.
Yeah, and it's not the worst card in the world to run. I mean,
no, it's hitting a lot of different matchups right now.
Yeah, like it helps you with the Odd Paladin. It helps you against the Q blocks, getting rid of their Dark Packs, things like
Combo
that.
Priest is kind of on the rise.
Yeah.
It's like a sleeper deck right now.
Yeah.
I mean, when we did our Tempo Storm report, we kind of reported that as like the sleeper deck that's on the rise and you should watch out for. That hasn't caught on in popularity, but is really good.
Yeah.
So it hit that.
But what, you know,
all of these like random cards in the meta that make a big difference.
Yeah, I think something important, for those who are watching this video that really enjoy Reno decks, let us know about your success. You know, post your lists on Twitter, tag Team One Trick so we can like and maybe even retweet your list so people can see your success. Because the meta is really young. Anything is possible. Don't give up hope yet.
Yeah. Yeah, Reno decks, because of their nature, they take longer to develop. They don't get out as quickly as other decks, and it typically comes down to a couple of specialists, you know, of the archetype to kind of dictate at least that starting pace. And because of that, you know, like I said, the word just doesn't get out there. So
yeah,
get your Twitter fingers ready.
Yes, and I got one final question for you, EK.
What's up?
How do any of these Reno decks deal with this? That's the big question.
How do they deal with Darkest Hour? The only Reno deck that has a reasonable answer to Darkest Hour is Reno Hunter.
Oh dear, and I think on that note we better end the video.
And you know the reason why they can deal with it. We can run Toxic Arrow.
Yes. So we want to thank you so much for watching this video today. Let us know what you think in the comments. Let us know if you've had any success or failures. We're happy. We read all the comments. We reply to what we can. You can also follow Team One Trick on Twitter at Team One Trick, and you can follow us on Instagram at Team One Trick. So until next time, I'll see you around, EK.
Yeah, sounds good.